Throughout history, the word plague has been used loosely to describe any infectious disease, but today, it refers specifically to the bacterial infection caused by the Yersinia pestis strain, commonly known as the bubonic plague. As human populations in the Middle Ages grew, medical knowledge had not progressed since the time of the ancient Greeks, allowing large outbreaks of infectious diseases to spread unchecked. There have been 3 major plague pandemics in human history, and with no effective vaccines or preventative measures, which would not come for centuries, the regions facing a plague outbreak had little choice but to wait and deal with the destruction afterward. Until the advent of germ theory in the 19th century, the only hope for devastated communities was the plague doctor, an expert brought in to control the rising death toll as best as he could, even though their effectiveness was often questioned. Affecting small animals like rats and mice, bubonic plague was transmitted to humans by fleas that jumped from one host to another once the rat or mouse died. In humans, flu-like symptoms developed: fever, headaches, along with swollen, painful buboes that sometimes burst. Bubonic plague acted quickly, and those who contracted the disease could die in as little as 1 to 7 days. The first major outbreak appeared in the Byzantine Empire around 541 AD, now known as the Plague of Justinian, named after the emperor of the time. With extremely limited medical knowledge, bodies were left piled up in the streets, allowing the disease to spread freely, and sufferers were advised to carry flowers or take cold baths as treatment. Unsurprisingly, the remnants of this plague continued to persist until the 8th century. It ravaged the capital, Constantinople, and killed up to a quarter of Europe's population, though some estimates place the number even higher. But centuries after the plague of Justinian faded away, and populations in Europe, Asia, and North Africa flourished, the same strain would reappear with even more devastating results. The Black Death was the deadliest pandemic in human history, causing up to 25 million deaths, around 1/3 of Europe's population. Appearing around 1346, this pandemic would continue to haunt the Eurasian continent until the 17th century. By the 1600s in Europe, smaller outbreaks of the Black Death continued to re-emerge in towns and villages. After 300 years, plague had become a dreaded but accepted part of life, and the role of a plague doctor had gained increasing importance and prestige. When a local outbreak emerged and cases began to rise, the town's mayor or governor would contact the best plague doctor they could afford and bring him in as quickly as possible. The work carried obvious danger, and a set code of conduct was expected of them. Faced with a highly infectious disease, plague doctors had to remain quarantined from the rest of the city, often living outside its walls, treating only plague victims and refusing payment from the infected since they were directly paid by the city, although some accepted money anyway. But most were so well paid that they didn't need to. One doctor in the 15th century, for example, earned 6 times the annual salary of a skilled worker, and this was not unusual. Along with substantial payment, contracts included extra benefits ranging from severance pay, full coverage of expenses and food, national citizenship if they came from abroad, and even a free house as part of the agreement. Once the terms were agreed upon and the contract signed, the doctors arrived and began their duties. In theory, this involved treating patients and managing the spread of disease as effectively as possible. But in reality, the treatment options offered little hope of saving anyone. Until the 19th century, the dominant medical theory was the theory of humors, first developed by the ancient Greeks and Romans. This theory suggested that humans were made up of 4 humors: blood, yellow bile, black bile, and phlegm, and that any illness was caused by an imbalance among these qualities. One common treatment for plague was bloodletting, placing leeches on swollen buboes to drain excess blood. But other treatments included enemas, the use of laxatives, and fumigating infected houses. Plague doctors were also responsible for counting the dead, recording deaths, and identifying neighborhoods with rising cases so that they could be isolated. In the Middle Ages, plague doctors made their rounds wearing the typical robes of clerics or physicians with little protection for themselves. But starting in 1619, the famous beaked plague doctor costumes, now iconic symbols of the plague, began to appear.
They dressed in long leather or heavy cloth coats, extending from the neck down to the ankles, accompanied by gloves, boots, and a wide-brimmed hat. The most famous part of the costume was their mask, a bird-shaped covering with glass openings for the eyes and a beak filled with lavender or other strong-smelling substances used to counter miasma, according to the theory that bad odors were the cause of the plague. As an additional precaution, plague doctors carried a long wooden cane that they used to point at problematic areas, keep affected people at a distance, and avoid touching the infected directly. Not all plague doctors wore this costume, but those who did were instantly recognizable and inspired fear if they were seen in a neighborhood. Residents considered them as omens of death, their appearance being associated with the terrible outbreaks they were hired to prevent, which caused some people to try to flee an infected area. Some plague doctors were completely unqualified physicians, while others came with a university degree and years of experience treating the plague, recording their findings, researching treatment options, and developing practices that laid the foundations of microbiology. By the late 17th century, the last effects of the Black Death began to fade away, and although it would not be long before another strain of plague ravaged the world again, the medical world was far better prepared to face it. In 1855, Bubonic Plague broke out in China and quickly spread across every continent in the world except Antarctica. Up to 15 million people died worldwide, and the pandemic would continue to exist in some form well into the 20th century. In a world with much larger populations and better transportation links connecting global communities, the impact of the third plague pandemic was far less severe than it could have been. The plague doctors of the 19th century no longer wore long black coats and bird masks, patrolling the streets and waving their wooden canes. They now wore white lab coats, were stationed in laboratories, and studied microscopes. Instead of practicing bloodletting and rebalancing the humors, they focused on isolation, incineration, and inoculation. The successors of the plague doctors reduced the death rate of victims worldwide, thanks to the development of vaccines. And although bubonic plague still appears in some parts of the world today, it is controlled and managed much more effectively, as modern science strives to prevent the emergence of a new plague pandemic. As devastating as plague outbreaks have been in human history, their appearance and severity triggered the adoption of preventative measures, such as better hygiene and healthier living conditions, as well as more effective treatment of diseases and a better understanding of the human body. Although largely ineffective at treating patients in their own time, some of these modern practices were first developed by the most responsible and talented plague doctors who put themselves in danger day after day. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel for more content, and if you enjoyed this video, share it with your family and friends, and help it spread around the world like a plague, even if this one is far less deadly.